Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Reports, This Week in Diaspora History. Let's get started. Eighth of Iyar, 1516, Venice, Italy. Venice became the first city in the world where the term ghetto was associated with the Jewish quarter, a place where Jews were compelled to move to. The term ghetto comes from gitto or ghetto, meaning foundry, since the first Jewish quarter was near a foundry that once made cannons. The Venetian ghetto was the area of Venice in which the Jews were forced to live by the government of the Venetian Republic. The Venetian ghetto was instituted by decree of Doge Leonardo Lorendan and the Venetian Senate. In 1555, the city of Venice had 160,000 inhabitants, including 923 Jews, mainly merchants. By law, the Jews were relegated to live within the gated and walled areas to segregate them from the surrounding Christian population in Venice. The Venetian government allowed the Jewish residents to engage in restricted trades such as money lending, pawning, and second-hand clothing sales outside of the segregated spaces during the day. However, at night, the gates that surrounded the Venetian ghetto were locked and guarded. Despite the seclusion of the Venetian ghetto, Jews began to thrive, and it became a cultural hub. Many early Hebrew books were first published, including the Hebrew Bible and the Babylonian Talmud, in the Venetian ghetto. In fact, nearly a third of Hebrew books that were printed in Europe before 1650 were printed in Venice. The Venetian ghetto's community population probably peaked around 1630, with about 5,000 Jews of German, Italian, French, and Sephardic descent. Before the Shoah, between 1500 and 1800, Jews resided in Venice, and nowadays approximately 450 Jews live in Venice. 10th of Iyar, 1103, Lucena, Spain. The great Rabbi Isaac Alfasi, also known as the Rif, passes away. Rabbi Isaac ben Jacob Alfasi HaKohen, also known as the Alfasi, is best known for his work of halakha and the legal code Sefer HaChalachot, which is considered the first fundamental work in halachic literature. He was born in Ka'alat Hamad, which is understood by most historians to be modern-day Algeria. He studied in Tunisia under recognized rabbinical authorities of his age. In 1045, Alfasi moved to Fez with his wife and 2 children. Fez's community undertook to support him and his family so he could work on Sefer HaChalachot. They also founded a yeshiva in his honor, and many students throughout Morocco came to study under his guidance. The most famous of his many students is Rabbi Judah Halevi, author of the Kuzari. He also taught Rabbi Joseph ibn Migash, who was in turn the teacher of Rabbi Maimon, father and teacher of Maimonides, the Rambam. Alfasi remained in Fez for 40 years, during which time he completed Sefer HaChalachot. In 1088, aged 75, 2 informers denounced him to the government upon some unknown charge. He left Fez for Al-Andalus, eventually becoming the head of the yeshiva in Lucena in 1089. When Rabbi Joseph Caro, several hundred years later, compiled the Shulchan Aruch, which became the standard code of Jewish law, he uses the Alfasi together with Maimonides and Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel as the 3 pillars of his work. The Alfasi has been studied and is still studied to this day by students of Talmud, part of the curriculum in many yeshivot of advanced Talmud study. Many commentaries have been written on the Alfasi by some of the greatest Talmudists of later generations. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi passes away at the ripe old age of 90 in Lucena, Spain. 11th of Iyar, 1510, Frankfurt, Germany. 1,500 Hebrew books and manuscripts were seized from the Jewish community. 1509, Emperor Maximilian signed the infamous Padua Mandate, therefore authorizing the confiscation of Jewish books in the Holy Roman Empire, on the grounds that they contained elements that were heretical, blasphemous, and libelous. The emperor also claimed that the books would, quote, turn you away from our Christian faith, end quote. Johannes Joseph Pfefferkorn was a German Catholic theologian and writer who converted from Judaism. He arrived to the city of Frankfurt with the imperial edict. For years, Pfefferkorn had been advocating for the confiscation of Jewish books. He believed that this would bring about the conversion of Jews and thereby the end of days. In the 4 pamphlets relating to the Jewish matters that he published between 1507 and 1509, Pfefferkorn never failed to emphasize the need to prevent the Jews from reading their post-biblical literature. Through the influence of Emperor Maximilian's pious sister and support of the Cologne Dominican order, Pfefferkorn gained access to the emperor and in 1509 was empowered by him to confiscate any offending Jewish books. This included prayer books, with the exception of the Hebrew Bible. When the Archbishop of Mainz, Germany, the Frankfurt City Council, and various German princes intervened on behalf of the Jews, Pfefferkorn addressed a petition to the emperor in the defense of his cause. The emperor ordered the return of the confiscated books 6 weeks later. 12th of Iyar, 1250, Cordoba, Spain. The Pope refuses to grant permission to the Jews of Cordoba, Spain to build a new synagogue. A turning point in the history of the Jews of Spain was reached under Ferdinand III and under James I. The clergy's endeavors against the Jews became more pronounced. Spanish Jews of both genders were compelled to distinguish themselves from Catholics by wearing a yellow badge on their clothing. This order was issued to keep them from associating with Catholics, although the reason given was that it was ordered for their own safety. A papal decree issued by Pope Innocent IV in 1250 dictates that Jews may not build a new synagogue without special permission. It also made it illegal for Jews to proselytize or convert people to Judaism under the pain of death and confiscation of property. The decree also mandates that Jews may not associate with Catholics, live under the same roof with them, eat or drink with them, or even use the same bath. Neither might a Catholic partake in wine which has been prepared by a Jew. The Jews might not employ Catholic nurses or servants, and Catholics might only use medicinal recipes which have been prepared by a competent Catholic apothecary. The rules suggest that every Jew should wear the badge, though the king reserved the right for himself to exempt anyone from this obligation. Any Jew apprehended without a badge was liable for a fine or to be inflicted with 10 stripes. Jews were also forbidden from appearing in public on Good Friday. Conversely, 150 years later to the day, the new pope granted liberal privileges to the Jews of Rome in 1402. Boniface IX showed exceptional favor towards the Jews of Rome. Jewish physicians had shown great skill in serving the sick of all classes during the plague. The Pope reduced their taxes and freed them from the obligation of wearing the Jewish badge. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Reports, This Week in Diaspora History. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast. We'll see you next time.